Have you ever been asked to help out with an IT request? I know I have. Well, imagine for a moment that there's been a very urgent request, and you've been asked to quickly research it and provide a summary of the responses. Maybe you've even been asked to provide your own assessment of the situation. You could manually check each response and then manually summarize the detailed list, but there could be very limited time, and even more requests might be coming soon. A much better option is to make your application check for and summarize these responses for you using Appian AI. In this session, you'll learn how to do this in just minutes. My name is Randy Richardson, and I'm a technical instructor here at Appian. I love sharing exciting new Appian features like the records chat component that will save you and your users time. In this tutorial, I'll share how to add a records chat to an interface and then use it. This is a generative AI feature that's fun to use. It was introduced back in 23.4, and it uses Appian AI Copilot. Developers can start building with it anytime. If you want to follow along with my tutorial here using the same set of objects, you can build them first using the Build an App Without Code tutorial on Academy Online. Or you can add the records chat component to any other UI and app you already have. Simply tweak the steps to fit your own data. There's even more to share in Academy Online and the Appian Community YouTube channel. Let's get started. I'm going to go over here to the designer where my request management application is. And this application already includes 5 record types and some interfaces. And those interfaces include a summary view interface. The request record is the one I'm going to be working with now. I'll go ahead and open this. And this record type you can see here has a relatively simple data model. There's the request record, and there's actually a one-to-many relationship with the request event history record. Additionally, there are some fields. The record chat copilot feature can be added to any sync record, and it's going to provide your users the greatest value when the record is dense in information and rich in related records. It's also going to provide the greatest value when you have fields that are based on natural language. So for example, this text field here for the description. It also works best when the record data is self-descriptive in both the field names and the values. I've also generated some data using another Appian AI feature. And I'm going to go to this new tab called Data Preview. And you can see there's already 10 records that have been generated. This is part of my sample data. And up at the top is the option that I used, this Generate Sample Data button. It's got the sparkle icon. It's easy and fun to use, so I'm going to go ahead and select it. And notice that by default, it will include the event history. You can generate data for your record types when there's a one-to-many relationship between the two different record types. I'm going to scroll down and click on Next. And it'll go about generating automatically the sample data. So leaving that checkbox checked here is a very good way to go, because if you have a fully developed application, what you can do is create the sample data for the record type and its related record types all at once. And that's going to be much more efficient than going through and doing that for each record type individually. Here we can see it's already generated some sample data. And one of the requests that it generated was to install new software, another one to update website content, another one to repair the photocopier. So these are very typical type IT requests. And if I scroll towards the bottom, we can see there's 10 of them here, and it ends with replace broken chairs. Scrolling back to the top, your list could look different because when you use generative AI, you can get different responses each time. Over on the right, you can see that it defaulted to 10, but I could ask for even more. I can increase it to 25 or 50 request records. There's also options for the record fields where I can select or deselect which fields I want to generate the sample data for. And then to the lower right, there is a place where I can add additional instructions where I could include or avoid certain types of requests. I can also go over to the left and select the event history, and I can see the sample data that was generated for the event history. So for example, ticket opened, request submitted are two of the first two comments. If I scroll to the upper right, you can see that I can also ask for it to generate more records for each base record. So for example, I could have 2 or 3 for each base record. And similar to the base record type for the request, I can also select the fields or add additional instructions. I'm going to go back over to the request record. And in the request record, I like these requests, but I want to actually go to the additional instructions and provide one of my own. So the one that I'm going to provide, I'll put in here as an example. And I'm going to ask it to generate sample data that should include one record with this request. How can I learn more about Appian AI? And then I'll go ahead and refresh the data. Refreshing the data will generate new sample data that I can look at. It does not affect the previous 10 records that were already in the cloud database before I started this demo. And I'll scroll back up. And we can see it's already generating some data for us. And the difference now should be that we will see the specific issue I requested. So here we see, how can I learn more about Appian AI? There's a request. And then it also generated some other requests, issues with submitting time off requests, training material for new hires. And when I scroll to the bottom here, the last one is website redesign feedback. So I like this sample data. I'll go ahead and use the insert on the lower right. This will add those requests to the cloud database. These are the first 10 I started with, and I'll use the search option up here to see what else was added. Here is the sample data, starting with record 11, and then the request that I wanted, how can I learn more about Appian AI, and then the rest of the requests. Now I'm going to go to the views on the left and locate the summary view for this record, and notice it's got an interface. I'm going to hold the control key down and I'm going to select the orange part here where the rule bang references the request summary view interface. And I do that to access the interface designer. So this is the interface that is being used for the summary view. And notice to the right, there is a component called the event history list field. And on this component, there are comments for this request, and the user could actually select the option here to open up the folder to see what the comment was. And what we actually want to do is make this a better experience for the user so they don't have to search through each one of these comments individually in their own summarization. Also notice to the upper right for the rule inputs, there is a request that uses a record type. The request is the name of the rule input, and it also uses our request record type. And there is a base test, or I should say a test case, that is being used for this particular interface. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to the palette and I'm going to locate the records chat chatbot just with a simple search, and I'm going to drag that records chat component over to the canvas into this first column. And using the component configuration to the right, I'll start with a few simple changes that will include a label change on this record. So I'm going to include calling this request records chatbot. And then for the instructions, these instructions here are what the user sees. So I'm going to just add to this for this IT request. And that'll change it for the user. Then the tooltip currently is empty. There is a suggested question. And I really do like this question. But before we configure the questions, let's go back to the summary interface here and take a look at some of the defaults. You can see the issue name, you can see the description, you can see the contact. And what we want to do is to avoid suggesting questions that one could easily gather from looking at this interface. So we want to leverage the record chat beyond just a novelty, and we want to be able to basically suggest questions that might take a longer time for the user to answer manually. Okay, so I'm going to take this question here for the suggested questions, and I'm going to put it under the tooltip because I do like that question. And then for the suggested questions, I'm going to add 3 more. And you can have up to 3 questions suggested to the user. So I'm going to replace the one that's there with an array of 3 questions. And the first question will be, what has been tried? The second question is, what is the most common cause of this issue? And our third one is, what has been recommended? These are the suggested questions that are come back to the user. So once I have those, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the initial message that greets the user when they're on this page. And I'm going to add in some additional static text and also some extra. I'm going to start with the hi, which is just fine, but I'm going to add in the concat operator. And some of you may have used the user function. Some of you may not have used it. This is a function in Appian that can actually go out and extract information from the Appian user profile. The documentation is easy to follow down below. It includes the username. That's going to be the keyword that I'm going to use. And I'm going to use another function that you may be familiar with called the logged in user function that will actually return the Appian username for the user that's using this interface. And then I'm also going to use the property that you see down there in the documentation. And in the documentation, there's a number of properties as well that you can see down here. They are case sensitive, so be careful if you're following. And I'm going to add one in here for the first name. And that has lowercase except for the N. That's going to be an uppercase N on that property. So what we're essentially asking it to do is to go out and extract the first name from the Appian profile for that user. And once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and add another concat operator. And then we'll close it off here and add our text quote and a little bit more text. So what I also want to include, I think, is a message that says something like, I am the AI-powered chatbot, and I want more information on this IT request. So I'm going to change the word record to request. And then what would you like help with is fine. And then I'm just going to add in here towards the bottom here are some suggested questions. So that's going to go into the expression, and then it will end with our quote, a double quote there. See how this looks? This is the greeting our user will see. And again, we can see the logged in user function is returning the name, and the user function is extracting the first name. And then we don't actually see the suggested questions, but we will here in a moment when we go about testing. The next thing I need to do there on the lower right is to specify the record type this is for, and this is going to be the request record. And then the identifier. That's going to be used to determine which record. And since it's going to be an individual record, I'm going to reference the identifier through the variable. That's going to be using the rule input on the request. And using dot notation, I'm going to pick the ID. And this is going to be for the primary key value of the request. The user is going to be interacting with it, selecting on one of the requests, and then the key value is going to be passed into the interface. So it'll be referencing here. Then for the related record data, this is going to be used for the event history, and there's very helpful documentation up here that tells you which function can be used. And we're going to use the ABang related record data. And this will be used when you have a one-to-many relationship with your record data. And then the keyword I'm going to use there is going to be the relationship keyword. And then I'm going to leverage the relationship with the request record by selecting the dot with the dot notation. And then the event history is part of that relationship. Okay, so that's my expression. Then I'm going to go ahead and click OK and save these changes. Now, there's a very important parameter we don't want to forget about called additional instructions. It's at the very bottom right there that you can see. And these additional instructions are actually going to be sent to the records chatbot. So if you've ever worked with generative AI in the past, you might be familiar with AI prompts and prompt engineering, and that's how we're going to use these additional instructions. When the record chatbot is being used, there's several inputs. There's going to be the data from the request that help provide context to the chatbot. There's going to be the user interaction that's sending it requests, and there's also going to be the event history and then these additional instructions. So I'm going to go to the additional instructions, and I've got some in mind. I'm going to start with some static text, and I'm going to tell the records chatbot what role it's playing. So I'm telling it here that it will be an IT expert, and then I'm going to give it some instructions. I'm going to ask it to provide a summary of this request in simple text that uses this rule input, and the rule input will come later. Then I'm also going to add in here, in your summary, provide the following only if asked for recommendations. Next, I'm going to have some additional instructions that I'll add there, I think. And the first one will be to provide a short summary of the request comments, indicating what has already been tried. And this summary should be fewer than 50 words. The next instruction is asking for any error codes. And in one of our records, there is actually an error code that we'll discover. Number 3 is a resolution with step-by-step numbered instruction. Then we are also asking for a resolution with steps not in this request record. Here, we're asking it to use the rule input to see this request history. And then I want it to end with an inspiring quote about resolving problems. You can also ask the record chat what tone to take. So in this case, I'm asking for it to be positive and to use a friendly tone. Now I'll provide the rule input by adding in our concat operator, and then using the RI-bang and request, and again, I'll leverage the relationship to the event history. So once we have this, we should have enough to start doing some basic tests with. I think I'll save the changes before I do that. And in our first test, the questions I'm going to ask include the one that we have on the tooltip. What questions can you answer? And whoops, I didn't quite get that one. Let me grab that again. And when I do this, the record chat bot will come back and respond. It's important to remember here that it's gathering its context from the different inputs that we provided. So for this particular request here, it can answer questions about the details of the request. That would include the name, description, request contact, and so on. The summary of the request details, it can answer questions about any troubleshooting or resolutions already tried by this requester, potential error codes or issues, steps to resolve the issue, using other data sources, and to be positive, it can answer questions about positive or inspirational messages. All right, so that's a good start. Now let's ask it what has been tried, and we'll see if we get a response. And as we do our request, we can see here, based on the details provided, it seems the office printer stopped printing documents, and the request contact here has submitted this request to have the issue troubleshot and resolved. All right, so this looks like it's working well. What I'm going to do next is actually test it from the record type. And it should be tested from here, so we can try it out with different values. I'm going to go to the arrow on the upper left and look at the request list here. This is our record list, and I'll select the very first one for printer not working. And here we can see the suggested questions. So what has been tried, what is the most common cause of the issue, and what has been recommended. So we'll start with what has been tried. So with this question, you can go out and look at our event history, and we can see the response based on the event history. It appears that the following steps have been tried to resolve the printer issue. So checking that the paper bin was empty and adding more paper if needed, checking if the printer needed toner, and then it ends with power cycling the printer by turning it off and on. And then interesting that it also shows that there was an error code 12 associated with the HP printer model. Okay. And then towards the bottom, here's our inspiring quote as well. We'll ask the next question. What is the most common cause of this issue? And we'll wait for the chatbot to respond. And we see in this case, it says, well, unfortunately, it does not have enough information to determine the most common cause. Printer issues can be caused by a variety of hardware and software factors. It does try to be helpful, though, and it shows some common causes that might include, for example, low toner or ink levels, paper jams, and other causes. Let's ask another question. What has been recommended? And we can see here the response that will come back. So based on the event history, the following steps have been recommended. Check the paper bin, check to see if it needs toner, you power cycle it off and on again, and again it returns the error code 12. Okay, so this is showing an example of what is in the event history that would be shown back to the user. It's actually been able to search through this event history. You can think here of the record chat as being an overly eager college intern who can use the context of your record and provide answers and quick responses. Let's try asking another brand new question, something that was not suggested, and we'll say, what else do you recommend? And when we do that and send the question out, we can see what our chatbot might respond with. And again, your responses could be slightly different. Here we can see, based on the information provided, here's some additional recommendations that could help you resolve the issue. And you can see it picks up from the numbering of before, where we ended off with 4. Now it's starting with 5. And check the printer's documentation on the manufacturer's website for information on error code 12 to see what the potential causes and fixes could be. Contact the printer manufacturer's support team. Update the printer's firmware, and so on. And then towards the bottom is a quote that could be inspirational. So now that we've navigated this request, let's go try out a different request and see if it works similarly. I'm going to go back over to our request and view the record list again. And this time I'm going to try out the second request, website slow. So again, I do see the questions, and I'm going to ask what has been tried. And so now it can search through a different context using different event history, and we can see here it comes back with this response. Here's a summary of what has been tried based on the request comments. The requester tried closing browser tabs. Too many browser tabs can slow down a website performance. They checked their network connection, and as a last resort, they rebooted their computer. Okay, one comment status shows that rebooting was the resolution. So nice little summary there. Now, as a user, I'm going to ask for a different question here. What is your assessment of this request? So we're asking for a judgment from our records chat. And as we see, it should return a response. And we can see here again that the request was open for the website running slowly. It looks like a few quick options were initially tried to resolve the issue, and then the request was completed here. And then towards the bottom here, we can see the requester was able to troubleshoot the problem themselves with guidance from the comments. And in the future, similar website slowness issues could potentially be addressed through performance monitoring and optimization of the website. Okay? We also see here that overall it seems to be a minor issue caused by local factors. Okay, so this is an example of its assessment. But this assessment, in this particular case, the user is asking for that. So rather than leaving it up to the user to ask for the assessment, we could actually include that in the additional instructions, which could save the user some time. So I'm going to go back over to the interface and find the component configuration for our record chatbot. And I'm going to modify those additional instructions here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into our instructions on the first line, and I'm going to add in some more. So after asking for it to return what has already been tried, I'm also going to ask for a record count. So I'm going to add in and a record count of the event history records. So I'm going to type that in there, and now we can see the additional text, a record count of the event history records. And then I'm also going to add in that this summary, let me scroll to the right there. This summary should include an assessment of whether this request is being actively worked on and should be fewer, and I think the rest of it should be fewer than 50 words. So let's see if that's in there. Should be fewer than 50 words, and an assessment of whether this request is being actively worked on. And again, I added in and a record count of the event history records. All right, so I'm adding that into the additional instructions and then saving those changes. And then additionally, I'm going to test that on my record. So I'm going to come back over here to the record again and view the record list and go to that second record to test with. So that's where the website is slow. And this time I'm just going to ask what has been tried. And now when I ask the question, the context of the additional questions and the event history will be available based on the request comments. We can see that the following steps have already been tried: closing browser tabs, checking the network connection, rebooting the computer. And then down here, we can see the comments indicate that rebooting resolved the issue, and the request appears to have been actively worked on and resolved based on the comment history. There are no error codes or additional troubleshooting steps mentioned. So the user doesn't need to, in this case, ask for any kind of assessment. So in this case, we've got 5 or 6 comments in our record. But what happened if you had 1 or maybe fewer records? comments in this record. So it would be nice to have a record chat component maybe recommend a follow-up when there is only one or fewer comments in the history. So I'm going to go back over to my additional instructions again here in the interface, and I'm going to also ask for this. So, and I'm going to do that in line 1. I'll add a comma there, and also say, and should recommend a follow-up with the contact. And I'm going to say only if there is one or fewer comments. Okay, so should recommend a follow-up with the contact only if there is one or fewer comments. So then I'll click OK and save these changes. And I'm going to go ahead and test it again. And this time what I'll do is go back to our record, but I'm going to test it with one that I know actually has one or fewer comments. And that's going to be this one down here. How can I learn more about Appian AI? So this is the one that we had generated together earlier in this session. And here we can see there was one request in the event history, one comment. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back out and ask it, what do you recommend? And after a few seconds, it should come back. This request was received on this date. No comments have been added, so it does not appear to be actively worked on. And here's the recommendation. I recommend following up with the contact to check on the status. So that's the recommendation that comes back. Now that we've seen the records chat in action, imagine the power that generative AI can bring when it's being added to your own requests with your own records and your own related record data. This feature is easy to configure, as you see, and you do not need a plugin, and you do not need a connected system. You do not need an integration when you use it. All that you need is an Appian environment that uses the Copilot feature. I'm going to make one more change to our additional instructions. And it would be nice to have the record chat component here make a recommendation for learning. And so I'm going to add an additional request. And I'm going to make that my 7th instruction here. So this is going to be return only the following response and URLs when asked about any request for learning more about Appian AI. Okay, and you can learn more about AI by enrolling in the Appian AI Fundamentals course. So I'll go ahead and click OK there and save these changes. Then I'm going to go back over to our request and let's ask that question. How can I learn more about Appian AI? Okay, and then send that request off. And the record chat component will analyze that question there, come back with the response. So as suggested, you can indeed learn more about using Appian AI by enrolling in the Appian AI Fundamentals course, which is available online. And then for an even deeper dive into building applications and the use of AI, you can enroll in any of the Appian instructor-led courses. That would include courses such as our Applied Development, Applied RPA, or the Accelerated Senior Developer Program. I'm so glad you made it to this session, and I hope you will be using this feature soon. Please like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications to see more videos like this one.